Hello there. From Ireland to France to Germany, there is a fast-growing rebellion within the European Union against globalism, but not a peep about it in the UK press. Talk about living in a bubble. The whole EU is erupting around us, and here in the UK it's like nothing is happening. Maybe someone or other doesn't want us to realise how uppity those continentals have become. Maybe the UK establishment is hoping to get away unscathed. Maybe they're hoping the smoking UK tinderbox they created will cool down just as long as our attention is diverted away from what's going on across both the English Channel and the Irish Sea. And right on cue comes along a handy domestic distraction that fills every nook and cranny of our press and media coverage. You know of what I speak. I'm not saying it's a lie, but wall-to-wall coverage? Oh, and it's not just in the UK that we're unhappy with our state broadcaster, the BBC. There have been recent protests in Sweden demanding that their state broadcaster, SVT, ditches its left-wing bias and starts reporting the news more objectively. Now, there used to be a joke about a newspaper headline saying, "Fog in the Channel, Continent cut off," or "Europe cut off," or something like that. And right now I get the impression that there is a layer of political and media fog surrounding the UK where Europe is concerned, to try and keep the eyes of the UK citizen in the boat, so to speak. Concentrate on how we're rowing in the UK, don't worry about those Europeans, seems to be the order of the day. But thankfully we have social media, where we can trawl through pages and pages of video, images and news snippets telling us about the huge upwelling of discontent across, mainly, the European Union. And the empty shelves in supermarkets too, and that's something Brexit UK must never find out about. Because all is sweetness and light and plentiful in the European Union, where all are united. Well, it seems that the ordinary EU citizen is anything but united with their overlords in Brussels. In Ireland, for example, there are now mass marches taking place, protesting about the levels of inward migration. 10,000 or more in front of the Customs House in Dublin alone. Something that has been smouldering for weeks, if not months. And they're also completely at their tether's end on the issue of basically having their agricultural systems shut down in favour of net zero and offshoring food production to other countries. Or, in my opinion, something that is worse, turning over food production to insect and chemical food producers. You should be in no doubt that across Europe tempers are now very frayed. But all that the EU citizenry sees is more and more government overreach, more and more regulations, and more doubling down on net zero and inward migration. The countries of Europe built up a series of more or less civilised countries with internal social and community structures that work for them. But globalism is changing all that, with part of that being the UN Global Migration Compact, which many of you will have heard of. Although currently non-binding, it sets the world on a pathway to zero borders. It is an agreement whereby migration is a right. And when anyone arrives in a new country, they must be given all the assistance they need to set up their new life in that new country. They must be actively facilitated in doing so. Look around you and ask yourself if those now inhabiting hotels or at the head of the queue for housing aren't a part of all that. Right now in Ireland, the cry is that Ireland is for the Irish. But the UN has a different ambition. To them, Ireland, like all other places, is just somewhere on a map that everyone has the right to go to and make a new life for themselves. So that in the end, any community that makes a success of itself will be the target of anyone who can board a ship, plane or bus. And they will turn up and you will have the global duty to welcome them and share your success with them. And wherever the wealthy try to run to in order to protect the fruits of their success, they can be chased down and forced into compliance. What we're talking about is a global communist race to the bottom. Because in the end, it won't be worth being successful or working hard. In the end, the most successful people will be those prepared to travel to the wealthiest places and take what they need until the place is destroyed, then move on. Everywhere that productive people go and make a success of their lives, others can then legally come along and demand a slice of that pie, whether or not they deserve it. That's the aim of that compact. Except, of course, where those that are destined to be the controllers of such a new world order are concerned. They will have a protected wealthy existence and all the armed guards they need to keep it going. And that disconnect is starting to manifest itself, with UK politicians demanding more is done to protect them from their own decisions made about us. And all this is fuelled, in part, by the narrative that if a country or community is wealthy and successful, they must have extracted it all from the poorer nations via slavery or cultural theft in the first place, and therefore that wealth must be ripped out and redistributed back to the people it was allegedly extracted from. Then there's this weird story that despite there being overwhelming proof to the contrary, those people from poorer countries were actually here all the time and were the ones that really built this country and its wealth, while we just sat back and enjoyed the ride. That somehow there was a huge number of Africans, for example, living in the UK who were the real brains and brawn behind our success, and they are therefore the ones that deserve all the rewards. And there are people out there who actually believe this mythical shit. And as I said, look around you right now. Isn't all this happening already? Now the socialists love this concept of the productive working hard for the benefit of everyone else. You know, the concept of putting all the sweaty work into the system that you possibly can, but only taking out what you need. An ideal that humans can never reach without divine intervention. Look at the amount of fraud and scamming that's exposed every day. We have this sort of system in the UK, for example, the social services safety net and all the associated benefits. And all that happens is that taxing and borrowing increases while the benefits handouts get ever larger, leading to fewer taxpayers and a growing number of benefits recipients. But of course, here in the UK we have the opposite, don't we? Lots of people queuing up to gladly pay ever more taxes and everyone doing everything they humanly can to stay off the benefits gravy train. Or is it the exact opposite? Now factor in the growing rights of others around the world to rock up and take their fair share of our taxes while treating it as some form of reparations, and you can see where this is all headed. And when there's nothing left here for people, will they stay and do the back-breaking work of rebuilding the country, or discard the rubble and look around for the next wealthy target? Anyway, looking at the level of rebellious activity within the EU member states, it looks to me like their citizenry realises the impact all of this is having on them and their ways of life. And they are acting in response to that. And there are now so many of them that the cries of racism and xenophobia are falling on ever deafer ears. While here in the UK we meekly await a socialist Labour government. And Keir Starmer's Labour Party is still wedded to all those socialist ideals I've just talked about. You'd have thought that Brexit UK would be ahead in this rebellious power curve, wouldn't you? Good luck, people.